Hey, it's Kat, and I'm back because what once was will be again. I got my thinking cap on because we're going to use some history to divine the mysteries of the Game of Thrones. So to get caught up, you need to check part 1 of this little series where I'm talking about Jon Snow and Daenerys and the parts they're playing, in which is Henry Tudor and Elizabeth of York. Because, as Mr. Martin has clearly pointed out to us, that this is taking place during the War of the Roses, and that everybody knows in history that it was the marriage of Henry VII after he defeated Richard III at Battle of Bosworth to Elizabeth of York. So the marriage of the two royal lines that had been duking it out for the throne essentially ended the War of the Roses with some additional assistance from things Henry VII did. And again, this is the marriage of the Hound and the Dragon, which is pretty representative of the wolf and the dragon, Daenerys and Jon Snow. And in that one, in the first one, I tell you, go back and watch Battle of the Bastards of the part 1, because you really have to know some other background to see what this is. And that Mr. Martin has played around with the genders of who gets what parts of the different stories, that he's kind of split up Elizabeth of York and Henry Tudor's stories and mixed them up and given them each a little bit to Jon Snow and Daenerys. So in saying that, I said that in Battle of the Bastards Part 1, who is Jon Snow, and in this last video, what is the potential that the person or the parentage of one or both of these people is actually more questionable than everybody thinks. So everybody thinks that the story is Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, and that Daenerys, if everything stands true, was the daughter of Aerys II and Rhaella, his wife, and that she escaped with her brother Viserys over to Essos, where they stayed safe. But there's these questions in my mind about, even if Rhaegar Targaryen had some prophecy about the dragon needing 3 heads, did it mean the dragon needed 3 heads? Or this concept of whatever needed to happen, which he clearly understood something had to happen, had to have 3. So there's a lot of different things in the background. And whether Lyanna Stark was even, remotely in a relationship, or he stole her away and raped her, whoever story you want to hear, it reminds me of Persephone in Hades, where, he snatched her up and took her to the underworld, and then she proceeded to eat 6 seeds of the pomegranate, which is representative of having sex. And, so depending on whose story that you read, maybe he snatched her and that part wasn't consensual, or maybe it was. But definitely, did she get raped in the underworld, or did she, was she a willing participant? 6 times is, a lot. I don't know, but she was stuck down there, so, there's that whole thing. So was she raped, or was it consensual? There's still no agreement amongst the Greek writers about how that all came about. Everybody comes down on most of them come down on she had to be raped. She was spring. What the hell would she want to do with Hades? And this is kind of what drove me to think about Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna. What really was their relationship, if there was any? Who knows? Because that's the story that's come about. And I say that I think that their relationship was not a relationship whatsoever in the terms that people think. I think that he took her at her request, because there's this little moment when they were at the feast after the joust. She cried when he played the harp, blah blah blah. But I think there was this moment where he told her at some point that if she ever needed anything, that she could basically drop him a raven. And that doesn't sound like, necessarily romantic. She had other opportunities to have romance. And I said at that point, I think that if she is in fact Jon Snow's mother, and I think that Ned taking Jon Snow kind of suggests very strongly why else would he take a child back and claim it was his bastard. except to, protect him from the potential of whatever Lyanna had done. And I think that there's something to be said for what he found out in the tower. Because really, you know what I think he found out? I think he found out it was all for nothing. I mean, at least the whole doing battle with the Targaryens and his father and brother dying and then going all the way and putting Robert Baratheon on the throne. I think that he found out that whatever Lyanna had done to get out of her engagement with Robert Baratheon, or that she'd simply just fallen in love and maybe got married and or got pregnant by somebody. It didn't even have to be Rhaegar Targaryen. That, but then, she had no other thing to do but escape. So I think he got in the tower and he found out it was a bunch of bullshit. That all these people had just died for maybe nothing. Nada. Zero. Zip. And I suggested that I thought, the potential candidate there was Howland Reed. Because he carries this storyline, parts of the storyline that goes along with Owen Tudor, and Jon Snow is playing Henry Tudor, who's technically his grandson, and his grandmother Catherine Valois died in the abbey after she'd been in prison there, giving birth, sort of like a Lyanna Stark situation. So going through all of that, I was talking about Henry Tudor in the last one about his bloodlines, and that he had such a limited claim on anything, that it was in fact Elizabeth of York that had the strongest, and he basically made up this claim about being descended from King Arthur, just to try to claim to be even more ancient than the Plantagenets or anybody of that nature, as a claim to the throne. But on top of that, he was stamping his mark all over the place. So, in that one I talked about his round table being above the throne of in Winchester Palace that was like the Arthurian one, so he could stamp his claim about the Arthurian bloodline all over the place. And, they didn't have TV. They didn't have radio. They didn't have magazines, newspapers, whatever. So how are you going to put it in the public's face? Well, he built things as well. I mean, he built a wing onto, Westminster Abbey. He built other public buildings, and they were some magnificent late Gothic buildings. But he stamped his mark all over it, and he just didn't stamp the Tudor rose on it, or the dragon, or the hound, or anything of that nature. One of the things that he included in this was the symbol of the portcullis. And so you'd have to understand that his one little claim to actual Plantagenet bloodline came through his Beaufort mother, Margaret Beaufort, who was descended from the bastard line of John of Gaunt, the third son of Edward III. So this was his one little claim. But he was using every single thing that he could think of to, solidify his claim. And so the Beaufort symbol was the portcullis. And this made me think also about, besides the claim of King Arthur, about what might be in the background of one of these two, because Mr. Martin has clearly used some really obvious symbols to direct us, in your face, that that this is going on. The Hound and the Dragon. It's Elizabeth York and Henry Tudor in history. They end the War of the Roses. And so there's this portcullis. So what I really did was I started looking around all the houses, the sigils of all the houses in Westeros, and there is one who has the portcullis. And in fact, it's the Ironwoods. The Ironwoods of Dorne. And they were once kings in Dorne, like they were the keepers of the gate or something like that, but they were descended from the first men. And they were kings before the Martells and Nymeria got together and, defeated the rest of Dorne and put them under the one reign. And they still claim to this day the Ironwoods as one of their lines. So everybody has these things that they say. And one of the things they say is the Bloodroyal. The Bloodroyal. That's their claim. So they're saying that they are from the ancient kings. They're of the first and most ancient kings in the country. So screw the rest of you with all your who you are. We're the Ironwoods, and we are from the Bloodroyal. So, and that goes along with the whole Tudor thing, where Henry Tudor made up this thing about being descended from the ancient kings of Wales in order to say that he was from a much more ancient line than any of the Plantagenets who were trying to claim the line to the throne. And so here's this portcullis that looks like the Beaufort symbol and the Ironwoods who do. So who could possibly be then the parentage? So is that Elizabeth of, well, he likes to mix it up. So Mr. Martin likes to mix it up. So Jon Snow's from Lyanna Stark. And if it's Howland Reed, who kind of played Owen Tudor to Ned Stark's, Henry V for 2 seconds there, where he saved Ned Stark's life. And then Ned Stark takes the child to raise, kind of like what happened there. If he's mixing it up, is the possibility actually about Daenerys? Because I think there's a question about whether Daenerys is actually really Daenerys Targaryen of Aerys II and Royale. And the reason I think that is because there is this part where she remembers the red door and the lemon tree, and people have already remarked on this, that's not actually a Braavosi thing, that is a Dorne thing. So as if she was growing up in Dorne and then something happened. And we all have this idea about Ashara Dane, and the Danes have this resemblance to the Targaryens. They have that silver hair and their violet and or bluish eyes. They have violet eyes. And that they might be from some Valyrian blood, not necessarily Targaryen, because nobody says they're Targaryens. We don't know. There might have been some other aspect in there that we don't know about, but they look like Targaryens. And then Ashara Dane had a stillborn child, supposedly, and then later threw herself out of a window. And then we get Viserys showing up with Daenerys sometimes later, and she has this memory. So there is this potential that maybe she is Ashara Dane's child, because Ashara Dane didn't throw herself out the window immediately. She had supposedly stillborn baby, and then 2 or 3 years later that this happened. Did she throw herself out, or did somebody throw her out? Of course, the Danes and the Ironwoods had a traditional rivalry because the Danes had sided with the Martells and Nymeria during their takeover of Dorne. So, would there have been a relationship? Or maybe it was one of those, it wasn't a relationship, but it was in fact, dishonoring, as Barristan Selmy seems to think about whatever event happened to Ashara. But that's just some ideas there. I'm going to come back with another section in which we talk about the Arthurian legend and some other astronomy or astrology that goes along with that. And in fact, the Danes, the Danes, and the Sword of the Morning, and a couple other ones, because I do believe they're in there. Thank you very much. Hit the like button or leave a comment if you'd like. I'll talk to y'all later.